Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's so good to be back and want to thank you for joining our weekly discussions focusing on the book Jesus in Our Days. We're here today to talk about chapter 10, which is about courage. So, with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to just take a few minutes on a weekly basis because this may be the first time you are joining us. And for you, this is, as you can see, the table of contents with all the chapters, and we are today at that halfway mark. But if you haven't really familiarized with the work by Joanna de Angelis, she, as a spiritual author, has written this psychological series that is just absolutely impactful and indeed very powerful. And I just honored to be here to present some of the main ideas found in the book and the intent of our discussions and this Life Talk series is to just go over and pick up those tidbits, those insightful messages contained in the first book of this series. Jesus in Our Days is indeed a very, very tiny little book, and it was written by Joanna in collaboration with Divaldo Pereira Franco. We come together weekly to review each chapter that, surprise, surprise, it's about three, 2.5 pages long. And so it takes probably faster for you to read by yourself than to listen to me the next few minutes. But in any case, I love that you're here with me. And each chapter, as you can see, brings us a different perspective about how Jesus, as our guide, as our role model, brought to us so long ago. And as we dive into his teachings, they just touch us. They go through this insightful messages and they go like, "Oh, I haven't thought about it. This is my reaction to it, and I welcome you to feel the same way." And just to tell you, those are indeed very therapeutical teachings, and as such, they open the door to teaching and attaining for all of us as the students of Jesus to opening to health, to opening to peace, opening to a sense of happiness. We are today discussing Jesus and courage, and we have 10 more chapters to go to. So I really look forward to continue this series of discussions. But let's go ahead to get to the meat of the discussion today. So, with my subtitle, those are mine, "The Courage of Jesus." I wanted to maybe talk about the fact that the as you can read from Joanna, the message Jesus, brought with the goal of freeing human minds to the truth made Jesus the champion of courage, right? So it's very important that we start to think about those terms because we are now facing the fact that we're dealing with the idea of freedom and freedom so that we can face our truth, or the truth gives us the freedom to be ourselves, right? We have a reference, truth will set you free. So those are the two sides of the coin, freedom and truth. And wanted to just take a moment to bring to us today a little short message I'm going to read to you from the book Happy Life, also by Joanna de Angelis, where that small message is about truth, and it's important because it just sets the tone. It's important to me, but it sets the tone about how to use truth, how to be a conduit to truth, to ourselves and to others. So Joanna says some people use truth as a weapon to attack others. And as I say this, I can see in my mind's eyes those instances where I witness, or maybe I was the harbinger, or I was the victim of such a thing, right? Some people use truth as a weapon to attack others. Truth, however, reflects a magnificent light that promotes understanding, which never harms or hurts. Another concept here, this light truth promotes, sheds light to understanding, and it's an understanding that should never hurt or harm. So again, in my mind's eye, I start to think about or referencing the concepts of shadow, right? And to shadow, to break the shadow, we need light. So truth is how we're going to shed light from shadows. But back to Joanna's message. Like bread, and I love it, it must be ingested in proper amounts, or like water, which should be drunk in the right amount. As truth nourishes and quenches, it appeases and satisfies, enriching those whom it penetrates with understanding and kindness. Never use it harshly as a weapon to destroy others. Otherwise, it loses its purpose, setting one free. Love it. I hope you also like this message. I'm going to post it in our Facebook account because it is just really brings to us the context to which the chapter on courage is set forth. But another way to think about it, she mentions, bread and water to nourish and to quench your thirst. I also have another metaphor about truth, which is often as a joke. We say, truth should be treated like a diamond, right? And as such, it is precious, but it should be offered in this beautiful gift box. And I can see this beautiful, perhaps red, right? Bright red valium box with a diamond. Because if you instead offer this beautiful gift of truth as a diamond and throw it at somebody, it will cut you, it will hurt you, right? So it's an interesting metaphor about how do we go about dealing with truth. But in any case, we can pause a minute here to ask ourselves, how do we handle truth? Do we welcome truth? Do we welcome truth inside of us? Do we accept them as that gift with the knowledge that will set us free, right? Again, set us free from our own shadows, from our own, say, repression, personalism. Do do we handle truth, or do we offer and accept the truth in the right dose? And again, if we are that vehicle to bring the truth to anyone, and I'm saying this to anyone who has a blind spot, and hint here, we all do. We all have that the blind spot where people see, but we do not see a truth, a certain portion of truth about ourselves, right? But if we see that, how do we approach that person? Do we offer the truth about that blind spot with respect and honor, or do you ridicule instead? Well, this is how we handle the truth, but how did Jesus do? Right? This is a book, this is a talk, a discussion about Jesus and courage. How did he do it? Well, first of all, we have to come to terms with the fact that Jesus' life, from birth to death on earth, couple millennia ago, was not an easy one, right? If we compare everything about it to how we live, is we are far, far from the struggles that he had to go through by simply living. He struggled. Yes, he struggled. He faced struggles continuously, and yet, and that's the beauty of it, yet he never failed to act the right way. And he did that boldly, he did that courageously. He did that, and he taught about courage. And he his teachings on how he did it comes to us because when he handled whatever situation and he confronted perhaps anything that is uh, veiled, masked, right, by or hidden by something. He was very much attuned to the potentiality for good or not. So, for example, when he confronted wrongdoing, as no, this is part of the law, this is the policy, this is how we do it, he still saw wrongdoing. Same thing for arrogance, right? And many times and I hope you can see that like I do, but sometimes arrogance is hidden in the veil of a false humility, false sense of humility. Injustice, right? Injustice as a balance of power. Hypocrisy, again, masked with the veil, I'm honest, and it's all hypocrisy. And something that is speaks very strongly to me, especially nowadays, which is how he faced social discrimination, how he faced those that were hidden from a, I don't know, social, economic, or even racial, religious justification to hide these differences of power, differences of a sense of social caste, social marginalization, right? He did it all and he talked about it all. He confronted it all with courage. And if we flip back to our days, right? So Jesus in our days today, we see that we too continue to face polarization. We continue to use masks. We continue to use what I call half truths, white lies, right? So it is perhaps good for us to be reminded, well, back to Jesus's days, how did he navigate? Well, think about it. Detested, disregarded group of people, this population, the Samaritans. Jesus chose them as examples of solidarity. If you think about the parable of Good Samaritan, is a good one, right? Where he counters the Samaritan's actions to those of the Levite or the priest, right? And it's beautiful. How are we doing this? How are we looking at those people anywhere in the world that are disregarded? They're thrown away. I don't want to see them. And I'm thinking, is that the homeless? Is that the poorest of the poor, those who are not given the chance? I don't know, but let's think about how he did that to the Samaritans is beautiful. On another instance, if we think about how the accused in public, right? This person, this actor in the stories of Jesus that was accused publicly of leading man to crime, right? And all sorts of transgression. Yet Jesus chose that woman, disgraced Mary Magdalene, to be the messenger of his resurrection. And so by doing that, we can see over and over again that Jesus, he was the voice for the poorest. He was the person that represented in his teachings, in his actions, in his words, in his parables for the poorest, for those who were neglected, for those who were humble, for those who are marginalized. And in doing so, he broke the walls of privilege and any other type of social hierarchy that may have existed. He addressed those who suffer how? Lovingly, gently. He could tell the suffering in the other. And yet, how did he address those who were hypocrites or cowards? Oh, he confronted them head on, forcefully. So it is a Jesus is very different. So we learn from this that he know how and when to address one way or another, right? And to whom. And as such, just to wrap it up, this discussion specific to how Jesus taught us, he never feared. And we know that our biggest fear today, to all of us that we all share, is the fear of death, right? And he never feared it because he knew the mission in his entire life was actually to die, and that's why he came to earth. So, no fear whatsoever. He was humble, but not subservient. He was affable, but not over sentimental. And he was friendly and yet stoic. How about that? Jesus taught us, right? He taught us that we can and that we should speak and behave appropriately for each occasion, for each person, for each circumstances, without ever straying for our core um, direction, our core mission, which is to grow and to connect or reconnect with our source, our creator, to God. So with that, we want to continue our discussion here by remembering that we can lean on him, right? We really need to give ourselves the right to be human. And I say this because it is with such a beautiful line and so simple. Give ourselves the right to our own humanity and to make it our main source of goal, of mission, of duty, that to keep growing and to never hold ourselves back wherever we are. Being human just means that we are vulnerable, right, to challenges, to struggles, to pain. And as such, we are invited to lean on Him. Yes, to lean on Him, because as immortal souls in our humanity, we suffer. And the biggest lesson that I take from these teachings today is that we should have the courage to live, which means instead of sweeping our concerns, our fears under our proverbial rug, we're called upon to face with courage and honesty, especially when we're afraid to. And I don't know if it's too hard, uh, and we think about like, oh, let me find some excuse, let me find some lies, let's not face it, this is too hard on me. That's exactly the time when we should create this picture. Remember the words from Happy Life that I read to us earlier. We should create a mental picture of ourselves receiving the light that comes from his teachings. Let's allow this light, right, break away all the shackles, anything that bind us to a sense of fear, a sense of insecurity, and even to our own sense of instability, of mental and physical suffering. Let us welcome well-being instead. And when we're facing the dilemma, it's time to just take stock. Why are we afraid? Fear, as we mentioned last week, fear is all about a protection, a mechanism to protect ourselves from something that is life threatening. And I often joke about it. It triggers the hormones to push us to the fight or flight response mechanism to that life threatening whatever, and we often uh, become afraid. But it is important to remember we are no longer in the African savannas. We're not here being chased by a dinosaur or by a lion. The life threatening situations that often push us to this fear is often the threat to our ego, to that center of our conscience and our personality. So, if we take stock to understand our limitations, but also what is the source of all that anxiety? What is my role? What is my responsibility? What is the situation in light to the sphere that I'm facing, right? And that with those teachings will give us the strength you need to carry on. And I know failure is part of our journey, and with failure, um, it is easy to fall prey to a sense of, I don't know, sadness, remorse, and in some cases, even depression. And these pages of this book and this discussion here brings you this invitation for you and for me, to all of us, to use that as an important lesson. Joanna tells us that experience is the summary of the attempts, right? I tried attempt one. I tried again, attempt number two. I tried yet again. Well, let's remember Thomas Edison, right? The 999 times, and he was still trying to be successful, and often failing. He would say, "Well, I'm closer to success than I was before in my attempt number one." In any case, Joanna tells us that experience is just the summary of those attempts that may bring positive, successful, or negative, unsuccessful results. So fear is it's not useful in those situations. So with that, let us talk a little bit as we come close to the end of our discussion today. Let us remember that instead of welcoming fear, right? Um, Let us instead welcome, admire, respect achievement, ours and anyone else out there. And when we see someone achieving, right, that sense of accomplishment, of achievement, of victory, of success, let us use that as an example for us, as a motivator for us. Let us embrace really all the opportunities out there because they paved the way for our own sense of success. And Joanna tells us, well, we talked about humanity, right? The humanity and the fragility, the vulnerability, the foibles of being human. And she tells us, let us embrace our humanity. Let us really welcome the sense of being human. That is the best of what we are, and make it instead the duty to keep growing. Let us not ever hold back. Let us act with a sense of optimism. And with that, we will be able to face our limitations and our fears. So, courage to live is the courage that must be practiced and practiced constantly because we will face obstacles. And when we have courage, it helps us overcome them. And it also, we will face our fear of failure. It is intrinsic to the process, right? With courage, we will face also um, all of the complexes of inferiority that we bring. It will uh, also have us confront our, I don't know, our limitation that may come from being sick, being ill, even if it's an imaginary illness, that courage will help us face them head on. So Joanna kind of closes this chapter by telling us, remind us that courageous people, they wait. Courageous people, they believe, and I say they because I'm not maybe considered courageous yet, but courageous people, they wait, they believe, and then they act, and they act at the right time, the appropriate time, whereas reckless people do not, right? They act hastily, heartlessly, and many times irresponsible. So let's take this with us. Am I courageous or am I being reckless? Because courage does not mean just plunging from the highest mountain, but it is to understand what it takes to get to that there and back. And I close here, and I hope you bear with me my flight of fancy to remind us that in 1959, so 64 years ago, a songwriter, Peter Seeger, wrote this song that is known to all of us as "To Everything There's a Season." And the lyrics, everything except for the title, is part of the first 8 verses of the third chapter of the book, the biblical book, Ecclesiastes. So in 1965, 6 years later, it became an international hit. And I'll close the chapter, the discussion of the chapter by reading to you. You will not want me to sing, I promise you. The Ecclesiastes 3:1-8. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what that is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to haste, a time to war and a time of peace. So I hope with all my heart that our discussion today can inspire you as it has inspired me to begin each day with love and courage. See you next week as we talk about Jesus in Resolve. Thank you for being with me.